Hi guys, it's Rach and we're back for a new episode of Ask Rach. If you've never listened to one of these, it's a conversation you and I have answering other people's questions. For the longest time, we have had a hotline here on the podcast where people call in from all over the world and ask me all kinds of things, personal stuff, professional stuff, knowing that I am not any kind of expert, but I guess just wanting advice from some random chick they know on the internet, which is me in this case. This week, I thought it would be cool, and I can't believe I haven't thought of this before, to be honest, to answer questions based on Monday's episode of the show. So Monday's episode of the show was about excuses. What is the real reason we allow excuses to hold us back? What actually is an excuse and why does it show up in our life? So if you haven't listened to that episode and that sounds like an interesting topic that you might dig, go back and check it out. But for today, I'm specifically answering y'all's questions around this conversation. These questions came in via the hotline, so you'll actually hear some people's voices as they ask very specific things. And then I'm also going to answer some questions that came in through DM on Instagram, where I asked the audience, like, hey guys, do you have any questions around excuses? And this is the stuff I heard back. So I hope you find it really helpful. Let's jump in. For funsies, let's start with the hotline. I think at this point you all know what to do if you want to call the hotline, but just in case you don't, the number is 737-400-4626. You can call in, ask me anything. It's just like an old school answering machine. And you can ask us to make it anonymous, to leave your name out, to leave your voice out, whatever you need. If you just want to ask a question, but you don't want your mother-in-law to know that you're complaining about her to the world. Now, let's start with this one, which I can see the topic of, but I have not listened to. So you and I are actually going to listen to this at the exact same time. And maybe you think about what you would say to a friend if they ask you this question.
Hey, Rachel, my name is Valerie, and I've been a longtime listener. And I have an interesting twist on imposter syndrome. I've started doing better in my business and have started making an increased income. And my fear is that the increased income will affect me in ways that I've seen wealth inhibit others. And I don't want to allow money to change who I am. And so I've been fearful of growing and becoming more and don't really feel like I deserve more because I don't want to see how it can change me. I want to remain who I am. To the people that are around me. So if you've got any perspective on that, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks so much for all you do. Thanks. Bye.
As always, Valerie, I have about 1,000 thoughts for you on this, both about excuses and about imposter syndrome and about finances and all of it. But since we are on a theme this week, let's start with our theme. If you listen to Monday's episode, then you heard me say that the excuses we make are messengers. They are guidance from our ego about something we need to look at. And in this instance, I actually think that you have a lot of story/narrative/excuses wrapped up around this idea of what will happen if you experience financial success. This is a really good one for a lot of people to do some digging on because most of us have some kind of story around money. For people like me, we were raised in an environment of scarcity and we heard a lot of stories from our parents or our grandparents or our family of origin around there not being enough money, around, money doesn't grow on trees. That's for rich people. That's not for people like us. There are a lot of things we heard in our really formative years that instructed where we are today. And the interesting thing is, I think for a lot of people who were in that environment, they actually are doing the opposite of you, Valerie. That environment they were raised inside of actually propelled them toward pursuing money because they wanted the security that came with it. What I think would be really fascinating for you is to ask yourself, What were the stories that you heard around people with money? What did mama and daddy or whoever raised you, what did they say? What did you hear them say around people who are rich, people who are wealthy? I bet you heard very specific stories about the way those people acted, either as a child or you have experienced some version of this in your adult life where the people around you saw someone, quote, change because of money. Spoiler alert, money does not change you. Money only makes you more of who you already are. Money is a magnifier. So those of you who are worried, oh gosh, I saw cousin Barbara win the lottery and turn into a total a-hole. It wasn't the money that made Barbara an a-hole. She always was that. So if you're not already something awful, I promise you that the success is not going to make you that way. The real question to ask yourself is, what are the characteristics that you saw in a person who had some financial stability or some financial success that you are afraid of taking on yourself? My instinct tells me more likely that you actually know someone very specifically that you feel like did change, and that the people in your life, your family, your friends, your mama, your sister, your daddy, someone had a lot of opinions about how that person changed, and they said it was the money's fault. That's where my instinct tells me something's going awry. And for those of you listening to this who think, wow, fear of success, like I've never even heard of that. Lots of people have fear of failure, but I've never heard of a fear of success. You'd be surprised how often this shows up. And what's really scary is that a lot of people will subconsciously self-sabotage to keep themselves from surpassing a certain level of financial success because they're so afraid of what will happen on the other side of it. This is a really good opportunity to do some excavating and see what is the excuse that you tell yourself for why you wouldn't be able to handle that money. Let's work through it together. Let's play a game. Valerie, I want you to imagine that your business just did $1 million additional dollars in profit. Like literally you looked at your bank account and you're like, holy crap, my hot dog stand just made $1 million in profit. That is so unexpected. I was thinking it was going to be like 12 grand, but it's actually $1 million. I want you to imagine that scenario. What's the worst that can happen? Like legitimately, what is the bad thing that you think is going to happen or who you think you are going to become if suddenly you find yourself with that kind of financial success? Yeah, it's like if you come into this extra huge windfall of money, by the way, that you have worked for pretty hard, I imagine. I just don't understand what it could possibly do that would suddenly make everything about your personality change. I think if you face the question from that perspective, and I wish you were sitting here in front of me because I would be so curious what you would say, like what you're going to suddenly start throwing massive parties and you're going to blow it all, or you're going to suddenly fall in with the wrong crowd because you have more money, or I just think that when we face it, the fear is not actually the success. The fear is what the success brings. The excuse is the protective mechanism that your ego holds on to so that you won't go there. But if you were to go there, if suddenly you experience this totally different level of doing business, what is it you are really afraid of? It's not the money. There's no way it's the money. Is it staying at that level once you've achieved it? I have friends who are entrepreneurs who are afraid of financial success because they already have to take such care of the extended family, and they're worried that if they have even more financial success, they will have even more burden to take on. So in that instance, let's say, the excuse is, oh, I don't want to make more money. I have a fear of success, but it's not a fear of success. It's that you don't have boundaries in place to tell your cousin and your brother and your auntie and your mama that you're not going to pay their car payment this month, that they are grown people who actually need to take care of themselves. We hold the protection inside of the excuse because we don't want to look at what the actual problem is. In my friend's case, the actual problem is that she doesn't want to have a confrontation with her family. So for you, I guarantee there's something underneath it. But it's not the success you're afraid of. It's not the money you're afraid of. It's something below that, or my instinct says something that level of success reminds you of another person, and the way your family or your friends thought of that kind of person, and that you don't want to be judged for being that way. So if you can look underneath, I think you'll have a better idea of what the excuse is actually trying to protect you from. Hey guys, so sorry to interrupt the video, but just want to make sure you know about my new book, What If You Are the Answer, and 26 other questions that just might change your life. If at any point between now and January 6th, you pre-order a copy of the book, you can get the Start Today Priority Planner, which for the first time ever is available in digital format. You can get the exclusive workbook that goes along with the new book, graphs and charts and everything that we could possibly think of to help you better understand yourself. And lastly, you get a vision cast, which is an hour-plus long video I did so that you and I can plan out 2025 together. You can dream big, you can review the year behind you, and look ahead to something awesome and new. Now I'm gonna do one that I got on Instagram DM. Where did you go? Okay, this is a really good one. Why do I make excuses even when I know really deep down that they are holding me back? Such a good one, because honestly, we usually know that we shouldn't be buying into the story that our ego tells us. We know for a fact that we should not let this subconscious voice that is not helping us, we shouldn't allow that to rule our lives. Why do we? I touched on this idea in Monday's episode, but to reiterate, the reason that you let the excuse drive you, the reason that you let the excuse hold you back is because the excuse is keeping you safe. The excuse is allowing your self-esteem to stay intact because it is allowing you to not confront some things you don't want to confront. The excuse is a shield, and that shield keeps you away from the fear of failure, the fear of shame, the fear of discomfort, the fear of, oh my gosh, what if I actually do the thing I've been talking about doing for 10 years and I can't pull it off, right? Because at least over here, I get to tell myself that the only reason that I'm not where I want to be is because I haven't taken the steps. But what if I actually take the steps and I can't do it? The ego is a very fragile thing. And the excuse is the barrier that you get to hold in between where you are and what you might have to face if you push outside the comfort zone. So the reason that you stay here is because you're used to staying here. You're used to staying where it's safe. It doesn't make you wrong or bad or weak. It makes you human. And I know it would be awesome if there was some hack or some quick fix or some easier route. But honestly, it just looks like you pushing past the comfort zone, getting to that space beyond it, realizing that you are still alive, despite the fact that you have been afraid of this moment for the entirety of your life, and then you keep going. Okay, this is a really good question. This is another DM. How do I tell if my reason for not pursuing something is a legitimate obstacle or just an excuse? That is such a fantastic question. Here is the easiest way to figure it out. If you are actually taking on the obstacle, if you are pursuing it, if you have a plan of attack, if you are trying to figure out how to get to the next step in your career or your goal, if you're trying to do the thing and you keep butting up, okay, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, and you keep trying and trying and trying and it's not working, that is a legitimate obstacle. If you're not actually trying to do anything, that is an excuse. I know, that's brutal. Because nobody wants to confront the fact that it's not a legit obstacle, it's just a story that they tell themselves. But if you are willing to face the fact that you are not where you want to be because you are not doing enough to get you there, yeah, It's freaking frustrating, and it's really hard to face that. And it's really disappointing, especially if you feel like you've made progress before and now you're not making progress. Yes, that sucks. But it sucks way more to believe in the monster under your bed, that something else is holding you hostage and it's just your own mindset. That sucks way more, because that is how we lose 5, 10 years of our life and then go, oh my God, I'm the problem. It's me. Thank you, Taylor Swift. The easiest way to tell if it's a real obstacle or an excuse is, are you taking action? If you are not taking action, then it is a story you are telling yourself to keep you here. Let's take another one from the podcast hotline, which is 737-400-4626.
Hey, Rach. My name is Electra Hug. I am 24 years old and have been following you for about 4 years now. And I'm a huge follower. I literally aspire to be everything that you are, the book writer, the public speaker, just all of it. I absolutely love you. But anyways, that's not why I got on this voicemail. I actually, since following you, have always wanted to move to the state of Arizona. And I actually live in Michigan now, so this is a huge jump. And in the past 4 years, COVID has happened to everybody. And then I also put myself through college. So there was just a lot of reasons why not to go. But I finally signed on a lease to move there in a couple months, and I'm so super excited. But there's a couple of things that I could reach out and ask for advice on. And so I wanted to leave this here because I think maybe it could inspire other people too. But there's two things that kind of stand in the way between me and this move. The first thing being that I am visually impaired. I've been visually impaired/blind since I was 16. So it's been a long time. I know how to live with this visual impairment, but it's still scary. It's scary to move away from everything that I know and start a life that I think will be much better, but with a visual impairment. Kind of scary. And the second thing is that I just found out my mom has stage 4 bone cancer. And so I was listening to a podcast the other day, and you had said that there's always a good reason why not to do something. And I feel like these are two really good reasons. But I'm trying to remind myself that it's still okay to go. And I'm hoping that you can remind me that too. Thank you, Rach. I love you, and keep doing everything that you do because I love it.
Oh my gosh, I love you too. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that, because I honestly was just going through voice memos and picking some that I felt like were a really good idea, but I hadn't listened to that before we all listened to that together just now. And it's so freaking perfect for this conversation, because I started out Monday's episode explaining the difference between a realistic excuse and an egotistic excuse. What are the real things that happen in life that are justifiable to stay right here? And what are the things that our ego is telling us to try and keep us safe? And what I think is so interesting about where you find yourself is you actually have some really realistic reasons for why this move would be super scary. So freaking real. This idea of moving to a new town, moving to a new state, moving across the country, everything is so different. But you have this added layer of the visual impairment that I'm assuming is easier to manage in a place you already know well. So you've got like this extra layer of something added on. And then you have mama and what she's going through right now. And so I suppose we have to start with you checking in with yourself about whether or not you want to be across the country from your mom as she walks through this path. And there is no wrong answer, I think, because I don't know the full story, because I don't know full context, because I don't know a lot of things that you know in this situation. Only you will know what's going on in your family's life and how important it would be for you to stay nearby. If you check in with yourself and your gut tells you it is not essential that I stay where I am, because I don't even know, by the way, if you live in the same city as your mom. I don't, there's like a lot we don't know as listeners of your call. But if you check in with yourself and you're like, no, I don't need to live near my mom to show up for her in the season that she's going through, then that's the only answer you need. What this comes down to is that lots of people will have lots of opinions about the way you, me, your cousin, your uncle, your son, your sister, anybody is living their life. Opinions are like belly buttons. Everyone has one, right? So it doesn't matter what other people think about your decision. It matters if you know in your gut that it's the right move for you. And I think because you've been dreaming about this for so long and you've wanted this for so long and you have the courage to sign the lease and you're ready to go, you can't let something like your visual impairment slow you down, because my instinct is it never has before. Yes, you have more stacked against you, right? Yes, you have more challenges ahead. But I also know that you've overcome challenges before. You put yourself through school. Like you said, you survived the pandemic. We got to the other side. You've made this big decision. That you leap, you go. In fact, it's actually an interesting thing to think about for a lot of you listening who also want to make a big decision or want to make a big change, is to consider not allowing yourself to have a lot of time in between the decision being made and when you actually move on it. So I think it's throwing you off a bit because you made the decision, but then you have months before you actually get to go move to the new place, versus if you make the decision and you just go, you don't have time to overthink it because you're already in the energy of the new environment and you're just trying to figure out the new environment. You're not even thinking, was this the right decision? It's like if you jump into the deep end, you're not thinking, was this the right decision? You're thinking, OMG, hurry up and swim so I don't drown in the deep end. And there's a bit of magic that happens when we just push ourselves into those environments. So I think that you know in your heart what is the right thing for you. I love that you shared some realistic excuses for why to stay where you are. And I actually think it's so cool for us to see an example of someone who has a realistic excuse, but doesn't want to allow that to impede them. I have an example of this in my own life. So when my first baby was 11 months old, I found out that I was pregnant again. And I was devastated. I had accidentally gotten pregnant while I was on birth control, but I had taken like antibiotics or something and it messed with my birth control and I got pregnant. And by the way, that baby is 16 years old and he's one of the great loves of my life, and it all worked out exactly how it was supposed to now. But if I go back 16 years to when I found out that I was pregnant with him, I was devastated. I truly was, because I was barely surviving being a mother of an 11-month-old. I had just gotten back to work. I felt like I was finally finding my groove. And then all of a sudden, I found out I was pregnant again. And when Sawyer was born, I made the decision to start working on work a lot earlier than I did with Jackson. With Jackson, I took quite a lot of time. I had this new baby. I stayed home with him. I did all of those things. And with Sawyer, I think about 3 months in, I went back to work full time. Like I remember being in meetings with clients and like my boobs would get so big because I needed to pump, like that I would leak through my shirt in meetings. And it was way early to be back. In retrospect, emotionally and physically, I was not ready to be back working. I had a very realistic excuse for why I did not want to push my career and my company forward at that moment. But I was struggling so badly with postpartum depression, and work really helped. I really, really found a sense of self in going back to work. That was like the number one thing that I was struggling with, was just like, I felt like I had lost myself. I would cry and just breastfeed and I just felt like like a cow, like my only job was just to produce milk. Like it was like crazy, but I think some of you can identify with the feeling. And the only thing I could think of was, man, if I could just, put on clothes, if I could take a shower and put on some mascara and go to work, like it gave me a sense of self. So I'm so grateful, Alexa, that you called and left us this voice memo, because I think there are a fair amount of people who probably do have justifiable excuses for why they shouldn't do something, but their spirit is saying, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Do it anyway, which is why it is so essential that we know ourselves. What is good for us? What does our spirit call us to do? How are we supposed to show up in this time right now as who we are today, not who we were 10 years ago, not who our community wants us to be? Who are we now? And what does our spirit call us to do next? That is the best question that you can answer. Okay, let's do one more from the Instagram DMs. Ooh, this is good. What are the most common excuses people make that keep them from pursuing a big goal? If you tell us what they are, I feel like I can spot them in my own mindset. I honestly think that the most common excuse is the word you place in between not and enough. I'm not blank enough. I don't think there's one common excuse. I think there's how we each answer this question. I'm not strong enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not old enough. I'm not young enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not connected enough. Like whatever we put in between not and enough is the number one excuse we need to be looking at in our own life. There's versions of like, it's not the right time yet. Well, guess what? There's never going to be the right time. But that really comes down to, are you courageous enough? Are you trusting of yourself enough? Are you confident enough? Because that's what the excuse points to when you say it's not the right time. No. What you're really saying is I'm not the right person. Because guess what? It's never the right time. Or, I don't have enough resources. Okay. It's not a question of do you have enough resources? It's a question of are you resourceful enough? Whatever you place in between those two words is the limiting belief that is holding you where you are. So it's not about identifying the most common excuses. It is about identifying what is the limiting belief that has shown up for you again and again and again since you were a little kid. The answer that you are looking for is most likely a thing you need to let go of, not a thing you need to add. It's not about adding something or buying another thing or doing a class or going to the conference or meeting new people. It is about shedding the ideas that were put on you when you were younger, that if you could just take off those weights that are wrapped around your ankles, you would begin to fly. That would be what I think is most common, is how do you answer the question, I'm not blank enough? Guys, thank you so much for sending in questions in the voicemails and on DM. I hope that this episode of Ask Rach felt even more helpful because it was aimed at a conversation we just had. I will be back soon with more to chat about. I hope you have checked out the pre-order gift, which is so fantastic. Grab the new book wherever books are sold. Get your priority planner, get your workbook, get your vision cast session. Let's start 2025 off with a bang. There's so much uncertainty in this world, so let's learn to be resilient and certain of ourselves. I will be back soon with more conversation. And as always, I love you, and I'm rooting for you.